recording, and I will mute all. And so today I thank everyone for their understanding and patience and perseverance with the erratic scheduling, which will continue because next Monday I will be, the plan is for me to be traveling with my parents to see my brother up in Philly. So there won't be, we won't have the journey class next Monday. So today what I wanted to talk about is climate change and what Judaism has to say about it. Like, in other words, if you Google Judaism and environmentalism, what will you come up with? What will you learn? So, so there are a couple of ideas here, and both are integral to our tradition. One is the earth is given to us as humans to use. We have to use it responsibly, but the earth is ours to use. And the other also aspect that is in tradition is that the earth belongs to God and that we can't use it in any way that we like. And there are two verses that are in Psalms that highlight this conflict. So they're in Hallel. We might be familiar with this song. That's part of the psalm. It's the third psalm in Hallel. Hashamayim shamayim ladonai v'haaretz natan livnei adam. So that means the heavens are God's heavens. V'haaretz natan livnei adam, and the earth God gave to people. Okay, so there's God's sphere, which is the heavens, and then there's humanity's sphere, which is the earth. And God stays in God's realm and does what God wants to in God's realm. And seemingly, it seems from this verse that we can do what we want in our realm because the earth is given to us for us to be in charge. So that's one idea. That's from Psalm 115. But then in Psalm 24, which we might be familiar with, it's the Psalm for Sunday. It's also the Psalm that's sung when we return the Torah to the Ark on weekdays. Ladonai haaretz umeloah, which means the earth belongs to God and all that is in it. So that it's just fascinating that the book of Psalms, which according to tradition is written by one person, King David, how could there be such opposing views? How could it be that haaretz natan livnei adam in Psalm 115, but haaretz ladonai haaretz umeloah in Psalm 24? Either the earth belongs to us or the earth belongs to God. Which one is it? So this creates for us a conundrum. And this conundrum really is only a modern debate. In ancient times, until the Middle Ages, really, even I'd say until modern times, there's no debate really about environmentalism, because before the start of the Industrial Revolution, before engines were created, there really wasn't a sense that people had a so-called environmental impact on the earth. People knew that basic understanding of farming principles, that you can't really farm the same land over and over again with the same crops. It's just not going to be, the crops just won't be so bountiful. So the people knew you had to rotate crops or let the land lie fallow. Okay, so anything that people knew about environmentalism was how nature was semi-impacted by human touch. So when humanity farmed the earth, there would be some kind of impact. When you'd fish, there'd be some impact, but again, before modern times, how much fish can you actually haul in when you are a commercial fisherman that would have any kind of impact really on the fish population in the ocean? You really can't. So there were big boats, but were those big boats used by commercial fishermen? I'm not sure. And even if they were, you're talking about people hauling in the nets, not machines hauling in nets. So there isn't the sense that people had really any kind of impact on society. So it's hard to really find sources that pertain to modern ideas of environmentalism and environmental advocacy, or to be a Greta Thunberg, right? There are no sources that would promote that kind of advocacy in the Bible. You really have to look hard. So in the creation story, God created us to be in charge of the earth and to be stewards of the earth. But even that, we read that with modern eyes to understand that verse, that we can add responsible stewards of the earth. Really, the verse itself in the first 2 chapters of Genesis doesn't have a sense that we have to be responsible as we are in charge and have dominion over all the earth. Okay, so that's the creation story. In the Noah story, God makes a concession to human weakness by allowing us to kill animals for food. So we have directly in chapter 9 in Genesis, the idea that we are allowed not only to be in charge of nature, but we're allowed to be in charge of animals and use animals for our purpose. So if there's any kind of argument for environmentalism to be made from the creation story and the Noah story, it is that we're allowed to use the resources that we find around us for whatever need we have. Chop down trees, kill animals, use animals for food, for clothing, for building, whatever we want to do. Take advantage of the world around us for our purposes. That's really the message that we get from the Torah itself. And then, like I said, from the Psalms, we have 2 competing ideas. Is the earth ours to do with what we want, or does the earth belong to God? And then finally, there's another idea that we can, 2 ideas that we can add into this mix that serve as textual basis. One is that the Torah tells us that when we go to war, we would want to lay siege on a town or a city, that we're not supposed to chop down the fruit trees in order to use the wood for that, for war. That the fruit trees have to stay standing. Now, is it because fruit trees are part of nature? No, it's more of a sense of future livelihood. Okay, that's what it's about. It's not to recognize that fruit trees serve a purpose and that they are different from evergreen trees, which in the mindset of a 3,000-year-old from 3,000 years ago, you can't get a sense that evergreen trees have any kind of useful purpose other than chopping them down and using them to build. Right. So the mindset of the ancient person is nature is for our purpose. Now, I've been reading a mystery series by an author named William Kent Kruger. I quoted this author on over the high holidays because he wrote a book called Ordinary Grace. And I quoted a part of a sermon that was found in that book. That also was a mystery, but it was a standalone book. He also has a series of mysteries based on this one former police chief in a far northern town in Minnesota. So if you're interested in mysteries, which are well written, and they get into the psychology of the characters besides the mystery of the crime itself, I highly recommend this series, William Kent Kruger. But what I also like about the book is that there's a lot about Native Americans in the story too. And Native Americans, the former police chief is 1/4 Native American. And so there is that plays a role in this whole series. There are encounters with Native Americans on the reservation in northern Minnesota and with individuals of those Native Americans. And you'll learn something about Native American culture and attitude towards the forest. And that for Native Americans, all nature breathes and all nature has life. And that when Native Americans chop down a tree, they thank the tree for allowing itself to be chopped down for its purpose. When they go hunting and they kill a buffalo or kill a bear or kill whatever animal it is, they say a prayer over that animal after they have killed it to thank the animal for its use and to help the soul of the animal achieve its place in Native American version of Olam Haba, the next world. So it's fascinating to read about Native American culture and their attitude towards nature, which is really what we would imagine environmentalism to be. Okay, so what I'm saying, so the final thing, so about use of fruit trees, that prompted my mind to think about Native Americans because of how Native Americans use everything in nature to the fullest possible degree. So nothing will go to waste in Native American society if they are taking advantage of and using something from nature. Okay, so that when the Torah says not to chop down a fruit tree, it's really not related to the Native American thought about nature, but more of this is future sustenance, and you can't chop down future sustenance, whether it's for the enemy or for you. And the final, yes, go ahead, Ani.
So on that point, it's very interesting because I thought about this a lot on a number of our trips. For example, we were in Australia,
Uh-huh.
We had the opportunity to meet with indigenous people there
Right.
who pretty much said what you just said. That is,
Yes.
they had various kinds of rituals, and so the thought I had was, which one of us is really, more pagan? I mean, we
Oh,
look at them as pagan because
uh-huh.
they do whatever they do.
Right.
Um, and what we do is ignore the earth and, kill animals.
Right.
So how does this all come
No,
together?
no, so you're right. You're right. And I haven't been, I haven't used the word pagan at all in relation to Native Americans, but I hear, yes, that is the Western attitude towards native peoples. They see them as when the explorers came, the explorers felt that they were the God's gift to the world, and that they were sociologically advanced over anybody else. And it was the rare individual in medieval times or pre-modern times when exploration began to say, there's something of value in these native peoples. I think there were a few people who did say that, but they were far and away the minority, and you'd have to look hard in historical source material to find that kind of writing. Most of it was, of course, that attitude that Arnie, you just shared. We are here, the white man. We are the superior to everyone else. And you, the black man, the yellow man, the red man, are here for us to use you and to take advantage of you. And your attitudes, we don't even want to learn anything about you. And even if we do find something out about you, it's clear that your attitude is completely against our attitude. So your attitude is wrong, and you're pagan, and we need to convert you to Christianity in order to set you straight. So I'm not talking about that at all. What I am talking about is, so clearly a lot of work still needs to be done in our world to appreciate, for people to appreciate other people, and to see them, it's for people to see other people as their equal, and that we all contain sparks of divinity within us. So we are a long way away from achieving that goal, but we have come far enough that many people can appreciate the culture of the Native Americans. Okay, so I'm not saying all of us do. I did say many of us, so that, I think that that's an accurate statement, that many people can appreciate today what Native Americans can teach us about the world and how we should treat the world. That's the idea. So it's not necessarily an environmentalist approach, right? So Native Americans do use things in the world. A 100% environmentalist, so how do we go about getting food? Are we carnivores? Are we vegetarian? Or are we vegan? Okay, so even if we're vegan, vegans acknowledge that you can use the earth and you can farm the land. Okay, so even that,
Otherwise they eat nothing, right?
Otherwise you eat nothing. That's right. Or otherwise you forage.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
You could forage for food, but that makes it really hard to do. So I think most vegans acknowledge that farming's okay. But even that, how do you go about farming without doing too much harm to the land? Right. So you got to farm intelligently, absolutely. So and so I think a Jewish attitude is to the world around us. would be more like a Native American attitude, which is you can use everything around it, but acknowledge that that there is something spiritual in, as Native Americans would put it, there's something spiritual in all of nature. Or as Jews would put it, there's God in all of nature. So when we use it, we should acknowledge that. So there's a bracha, for everything we eat and everything we do as we take it out of nature, right? So that bracha, that blessing, helps us acknowledge the source, and it's supposed to temper our attitude towards using things in the world around us. The final thing I just want to throw into this pot is the idea of the sabbatical year. And so some environmentalists would see that. So in other words, what I mean by that is that this year, 5782, is a sabbatical year. It's the Shemitah year. Now, technically speaking, Shemitah, the sabbatical, applies only to the land of Israel. It does not apply anywhere else in the world. And Shemitah is applied, the laws of the sabbatical year apply to the land of Israel because the land of Israel is holy. God chose the land of Israel to be holy from among all other lands on earth. And God chose the people of Israel to be holy, holier than all other people on earth. So when the holy people of Israel live in the holy land of Israel, then the holy people of Israel observe Shabbat and observe all the mitzvot, and they have to help the holy land of Israel observe Shabbat also. And the land's Shabbat lasts a whole year. So humanity's Shabbat is one day of the week. The land's Shabbat is 1 year every 7 years. So scientists can argue, wow, how brilliant the Torah is for coming up with this idea of letting land lie fallow, how healthy that is for the land, how it allows nutrients to be restored into the soil. Okay, just as people make arguments about kashrut and the animals that we eat and the animals we don't eat, and that the animals we do eat happen to be healthier to eat than the animals that we don't eat. Okay, that's nice that it works out that way, but that's not the original purpose. The original purpose is because God said so. We do this because God said so, and we do Shemitah because of a reflection of holiness. Okay, now there are those moderns today who want to apply laws of Shemitah to all earth, not just the land of Israel. Okay, you can do that, but that's not the original intent. So there are, among liberal streams of Judaism, those who are advocating for observing Shemitah this year, and that it would be a perfect opportunity to be advocates for the world and advocates for environmentalism, advocates for intelligent farming, etc., etc. Okay, but it's all I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it is reading into Shemitah things that hadn't been there before and taking away the idea of the holiness of the land of Israel. And I would say it's not like you're watering it down, but you're taking advantage of it and applying it in ways that hadn't been meant before. And it's no different than just trying to say how we need to be environmentalists all the time, not just in 5782, but in every year and every day we need to be environmentalists. So my last point that I want to say is that as we understand environmentalism today, so I guess I'm not basing this on a standard definition of what environmentalism is. My understanding of environmentalism is knowing the the condition of planet Earth and what we need to do as human beings to responsibly use it and take care of planet Earth. That's how I understand environmentalism. And what I'm saying is all along is that Judaism, in this understanding of knowing science and the impact we have had on planet Earth, these are new things. Jews did not know this before modern times. It was just not part of our mindset. People didn't talk about using the world in that way, in responsible ways. It's only in modern times that people have started to understand what kind of impact we have had on the earth. And it is only through the Industrial Revolution that we have decimated the earth, and we have severely endangered the future survival of humanity, life on Earth and Earth itself. So with all of that, how do we understand now these modern ideas of the Earth? How do we understand a Jewish approach to it? It's really a modern ethical and moral approach that we are making Jewish. So you have to look at these sources, and then you have to pick and choose among the sources and interpret them in ways that they've never been interpreted before to give it a Jewish slant. Okay, and finally, I would say we don't really need to have Jewish texts to cause us to be proper stewards of the earth, right? That, in other words, right, we don't need the Torah to tell us that we shouldn't murder somebody. We don't need the Torah to tell us that we shouldn't steal. The Torah does tell us these things, but we don't really need them because they are basic moral, ethical principles that apply in Judaism too. So I would say environmentalism is a basic ethical, moral principle today that absolutely is a Jewish principle too. There would be no Jew who would say, we need to be anti-environmentalist. You really, there isn't a Jew to say that today. There are Jews who would say, you know, I eat animals, okay? All of us who eat meat are not purely environmentalist, okay? Because it's really hard. It's really hard to eat meat in what is it? An animal raising safe, ethical way. It's hard to do. It used to be that veal was proposed not to be eaten because of how baby cows were treated from the moment of birth till they were slaughtered for meat. So it's not the case today with veal anymore, from what I understand, that calves are not raised that way anymore. So it is okay if you're going to eat meat to eat veal. Now, there is an argument about eating goose liver. Goose liver theoretically is kosher. Goose is kosher, so anything in the goose is kosher. But pâté de foie gras, I can't really pronounce it the right way in French, how geese are raised and fattened so that their livers are so big, disproportionately big to the goose's body, that would be unethical, I would say, to eat. Okay, now, I don't know if you can buy kosher goose liver. You probably can, but it's probably hard to get. You can get it in Israel for sure. Can you get it here in America? I'm not sure. I haven't looked. But I would suggest that if you're going to eat meat, you should eat meat in as ethical a way as possible. If you're going to eat fish, you should eat fish, you know, farm raised. I don't know how do you eat the tuna fish in the can? Where's the tuna coming from? How are they getting the tuna out of the ocean into the can? Are they doing it in a way that protects the tuna population so that we're not overfishing the tuna or overfishing the salmon, et cetera, et cetera. So these are questions that should be raised. And I don't know how to answer these questions when I go to Moti's to buy my kosher meat. Do I know that the kosher meat there is so there's organic kosher meat that you can buy there. Are the standards of organic meat good enough for those who eat meat to say that I'm being environmentally conscious? I don't buy organic fruits and vegetables, which I know are treated, they don't have the pesticides. Organic supposedly doesn't have the pesticides on them. So there are lots of things that we can do when we eat, and the food, the material that we buy, to be sure that we are caring for the environment. The problem is, how do we institute laws and policy in such a way that the only thing you can buy is environmentally good products, right? So the climate accord that was just passed in Glasgow, Scotland, just over the weekend is something, but is it enough? What is, to me, a possible positive outcome of the Glasgow conference was that US and China have agreed to talk about environmental impact and climate change. That, I think, is a beginning step, because the wealthiest nations on earth who have the most impact on the environment need to treat the environment safely and be leaders for the world. And so, yes, it costs money in order to transform business and industry to be environmentally safe, but we need to be the examples in doing that before it's too late. So with a goal that Biden is trying to have for us to go electric for cars, okay, that's good. But of course, there's an environmental impact of batteries as well. But is the environmental impact of that less than the fossil fuels that go into gasoline-powered cars? So I haven't done the research about that. I think it is better. Somebody told me, going solar is good, but what happens to the solar panels when they've reached their life expectancy, right? When they have to be replaced. So how do you get rid of and trash solar panels in an environmentally safe way, right? So and wind turbines offshore, do they have an impact on migratory birds? I don't know. So there's always a give and take. So we think that with wind turbine and solar and electric vehicles are the way to go, but are they really the way to go in as environmentally safe way? So all I'm saying, I don't have the answers to these questions. I'm not an environmental scientist. I haven't done a lot of reading about it, but it just seems to me to make sense that business can't be transformed overnight. Our industrial society can't change overnight, but as Jews who are ethically and morally and spiritually bound to view our relationship to the earth in a religious way, we are bound to advocate for such a transformation. Okay, so I wouldn't go out there and say all of us should be tree huggers. Not that there's anything wrong with being a tree hugger. And I don't mean to denigrate tree huggers by calling them tree huggers. I'm just saying that that the average Jew doesn't have to be a tree hugger in order to be a good Jew. But there has to be somewhere along the spectrum that though we don't have to be a tree hugger to be a good Jew, we certainly shouldn't be a gas guzzler to be a good Jew. There has to be some place in the middle, probably closer to the tree hugger end of the spectrum, in order to be a good Jew. Where should we be on that spectrum? That depends on what element or aspect of environmentalism we're dealing with. So the transformation of industry should be done as quickly and efficiently as possible in order to save the earth, and farming practices, and because all of it has to be done in a way that it's affordable to the average person, right? Not everybody can afford to shop at Whole Foods, or Roots, right? Where you feel good about what you're buying there because that's as organic and as good for the environment as possible, but it's really expensive. So every store should be a Roots. That's what I think. Every store should be a Roots. And so that even people on food stamps should be able to afford to shop at Roots. That should be their supermarket of choice. That's I think what we should be working towards as a society. All right, Arnie, what did you want to add?
Yeah, well, this happens to be a topic that I've thought a whole lot about and read a lot about.
Yeah.
And I guess I have strong feelings, but
yeah.
The one term you used about saving the earth.
Yes.
I don't really think it's about that. By the way, the earth's going to go on just fine without us.
But it might not be able to, it might not sustain life.
It might not sustain us. Right. Our species could, and I think our species is on a track.
Yes.
To
extinction.
To extinction. It does look like that's what could easily be,
right.
Several hundred years down the road. I'm hopeful that a combination of coming to our senses and again, it's my engineering training, frankly, and that belief that technology can make some inroads should we come to the place where we decide to actually spend money on it. There's a difference between, pulling out all the oil from the ground and burning it. What that does in the atmosphere is a little different than, for example, burying a piece of, burying an old solar panel, or possibly, extracting as much to recycle from that solar panel so that you can use it over and over again.
Right.
So I think there's hope, but
yes,
what I guess I just want to say is, I understand what you're saying about Judaism.
Yeah.
But my personal view is, and where my head is, it's about choosing life.
Yeah.
That is why every Jew should care about this, because it is our future as a human.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. So I guess I had been presenting this from the Earth's perspective as opposed to humanity's perspective. So yes, all of this related to environmentalism comes from the attitude that people are important, right? So you raise the issue. Okay, well, we could care about humanity's future, or we couldn't. And so there could be those who say, let's use everything in the earth to our heart's content, because it's all about us now, short term.
Right now.
And who cares about 5 generations from now? Because the earth is going to be around, like you said. But people might not be on it, but who cares? That's their problem, not my problem. There are people like that in the world today, and there are people like that in industry, and there are people like that in countries around the world too, in leadership positions. So, but I think many people have a different attitude towards that. And they're starting to see, what the responsible thing to do is to care about future generations, right? And there are sources in in rabbinic literature about that, right? Like the Roman soldier comes up to the 70-year-old man who's planting a sapling. Why are you planting that sapling? You're not going to be able to use it. And the old man says, that's the point. I'm not planting it for me. I'm planting it for my grandchildren. So that source has been used to promote this idea, not just of environmentalism, that nature is for the future generation, but also just a general thing that our purpose on Earth is to be a legacy, provide a legacy for future generations. So there's an egocentric kind of attitude for using the environment, and I think what most modern liberal Jews would say, not necessarily definitively Judaism would say, is that we need to use the environment well and safely, and we need to intervene to ensure that everything about the earth today can be there in generations to come. Any other thoughts or comments about this?
I do have one other question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is one that
That's okay.
we read the Shema every day.
Right.
The second paragraph has for a long time troubled me.
What about it?
Because it starts out with, says, if you do this, you'll have the rains in the right time, and
yes,
all the plants will grow, and you'll be
right.
able to. But then, if you don't, we're gonna take this away from you. You won't
right.
have rain. I mean, how do people thinking about the content? How do they make sense out of this for our lives?
Well, that's a whole other question about theodicy. And so the technical term for that is theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? Okay, so that second chapter, that second section of the Shema is a theodicy argument, that if we follow in God's ways, then the expectation is that we're going to be rewarded for that. And the reward
in the environment will
right.
reward us.
Yes. So now you can understand that. You can understand that second paragraph from an environmental perspective. You take care of the earth properly,
right?
Follow the proper procedure in taking care of the earth, then the rain will come at the right time and the right amount. You don't take care of the earth properly, then the rain will come at the wrong time and at the wrong amount, as we're seeing now for the past couple of years, if not several years, how climate change has affected, the summers have been hotter, winters have been hotter, the cycle, the jet stream has gone in crazy courses, and a much more devastating hurricanes and storms and flooding, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, that could reflect that section of the Shema. This is what happens when you don't follow in God's ways, which here would be interpreted as being responsible stewards of the earth. That's part of the covenant too. You follow that aspect of the covenant of being proper stewards of the earth, then climate should work the right way. But if you
that's an argument that can be used, because I do like that way of thinking.
No, you absolutely can interpret that, and it's probably that's probably a more reasonable way to, it's not a stretch for that paragraph to see it in an environmental impact way, as opposed to a general theodicy way. Why, like a Harold Kushner, why do bad things happen to good people? Right, you can narrowly see it as environmental impact, and that would be appropriate. Yeah. So that's good. That's a good thought to add to this too. Okay, so why don't we end here? So 2 weeks from today is when we'll meet again, and that'll be during Hanukkah already. It'll be the second day of Hanukkah, So we'll talk about Hanukkah next time, and what kind of holiday it is. What do we learn about Hanukkah from Jewish tradition? So
one last question.
Yeah,
Are
go
all the older ones, because playing golf on Mondays, I missed a lot of these.
yeah, they're
So-
there. You can look. Yeah, you can look on my channel. Yeah, how can you, if you just look for me on YouTube, Jonah Lehman, or maybe jonahlehman@gmail.com. You'll see my channel and you can see previous videos.
So I can go back and probably find them all.
You can journey through the Jewish year. That's how I've called them. So
Okay,
just look for them.
I got a lot more time now.
Okay. All right. Very good. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.